I'm not. I'm listed. Medical cannabis access. So I just saw my...
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to this wonderful woman that we have here today, Dr. Bonni Goldstein. Thank you for interrupting your holiday to the UK to be here. So I'm very, very excited to be talking to you today. Can you firstly just tell me a bit about yourself and how you started to prescribe medical cannabis to paediatric patients?
Hi everybody, my name's Bonni Goldstein and I'm the director of a Los Angeles-based medical cannabis specialty practice. I started off as a pediatrician trained at Children's Hospital Los Angeles many years ago, and after about 15 years as a pediatric emergency medicine physician, I had a friend who asked me about medical cannabis and I didn't really know anything. So I started doing my research and I could not believe that I didn't know about the endocannabinoid system and I didn't know about how cannabis is medicine. So I started working in this field in 2008. I've seen thousands and thousands of patients because in California, as you probably know, we have medical cannabis since 1996. Now we have legalized too, but we still have a medical program. I've treated over about 1,500 pediatric patients with severe epilepsy, autism, cancer, genetic syndromes, GI conditions, end of life, and I'm really happy to share my experience with everybody today.
Thank you so much. And we forgot to say that you are one of the most prevalent and important paediatric consultants in the world. So to have you here today is really, really special.
Thank you.
And you've been very supportive to Matt and Callie's organisation, MedCan Support. So, and as you know, we have a huge problem in the UK for paediatric access. And I always find it an irony, really, that children changed the law in this country nearly 4 years ago, and they are being left behind. And a lot of that reason is because of what I would see as ignorance of doctors, and doctors feeling frightened of this new medicine. So why do you think doctors are fearful of this of prescribing this medicine? And did you feel fearful when you started out?
Well, let me answer the last part first. So when I started in 2008, I actually, even though I was a pediatrician, in California, any physician in good standing was able to recommend cannabis. So I saw mostly adults for those first 5 years. And I have to tell you, my husband calls me a chicken in a mommy suit. If you unzip me, there's a chicken inside. So I'm very, very careful with my patients. But what I saw was the same thing over and over again in my adult patients, which was improvements. I'm sleeping better. I feel better. I'm getting off medications. How is it possible that this is what's happening? They're not, and I used to joke around, they're not all meeting in the parking lot and saying, let's go tell her this. They're all having the same experience. So after about 2 or 3 months of taking care of adults, who, by the way, were already using cannabis at the time, but they wanted to be part of a legal system to be able to access their medicine legally in a dispensary, I realized that cannabis is really very safe and very benign medicine in that it either works or it doesn't work, but it doesn't appear to cause harm, especially under medical supervision. So at that time I decided I'm going to treat cannabis like any other medicine that I would prescribe safely, watch the patients, observe, make sure they contact me to follow up. And what I've seen with pediatric patients is the same thing. In fact, most parents are very conservative. They're not just handing their child whatever. Their child's very sick for the most part. If a child's in my office, they're quite ill. I did come up against a lot of resistance from neurologists, oncologists, and other pediatric specialty because they just thought what I was doing was very fringe, but yet they could not deny that these patients were doing better. And not everybody gets better, but when you see a 70–80% improvement, which is usually much better than most of the pharmaceuticals, especially in children who have intractable epilepsy or severe autism, You cannot deny the results. I think doctors are fearful, one, because they don't learn about it in medical school. But what do we learn in medical school? That cannabis is a drug of abuse. And someone once said to me that doctors are very good students. Once they learn something, they don't unlearn it. They keep that in their heads. So there's a real disconnect to what's happening with patients versus what doctors are being taught, and unfortunately it's very hard to reverse that. I think also the idea of botanical medicine is foreign. We don't learn about that in school, so the idea that you don't have a standardized treatment, but the reality is that phytocannabinoids and other types of phytochemicals that are found in plants have been medicine for a lot longer than they haven't been medicine. And I think it's very important, especially for patients who've tried conventional medicine and have not done well, that they have this option. I don't think it behooves physicians to continue the opposition, because our patients are going to use it anyway, and we should take the lead. And we should help patients, we should learn about it, and we should acknowledge the incredible benefits that can come from these phytocannabinoids.
Thank you. How do you think doctors, what more do you think we can do, for example, what happened where you were to make doctors more comfortable with this medicine? Because we're in a position in the UK at the moment where we're trying to sort of shoehorn botanical medicines into a pharmaceutical model. Government's asking for randomised controlled trials, and in the middle of that are suffering patients, especially the children with epilepsy whose parents are having to pay for private prescriptions. And we at MedCan Support are having families say to us, well, my doctor's just told us to go home and make our child comfortable, and I can't ever understand that. I don't understand why anyone would do that when there could be an unlicensed option in medicinal cannabis. So what do you think we can do to make doctors feel more comfortable, or do you think it's just time? Do you think it's, because we have got 100 private, for adults, we've got 100 private doctors prescribing, and they are leading the way, but for children there are no prescribers, and that's the real problem. How do we get them to be comfortable?
Well, unfortunately, we have to fight. So that's why I've joined you and Matt to try to do as much as I can to help. Because with my experience that I've seen, and again, going back to the fact that I'm a very conservative physician, I'm well trained from a very good hospital, I think we just have to keep chipping away at the paradigm of botanical medicine is not part of the program. I think it is criminal, it is inhumane to deny a child who has tried a multitude of other medicines that did not help or even made them worse, or even addicted. A lot of these kids are on benzodiazepines and they are addicted to them. You can't get them off, and yet it's not helping. You've created harm. So I just think we have to keep chipping away. In the United States, as you all probably know, there's a little girl named Charlotte who a certain oil was named after. Her mother basically went to every person she could talk to and just said, "You look at my daughter seizing, look at her now." That before and after makes a huge difference. And she also went to politicians, she went to hospitals. You just have to keep fighting. It's unfortunate that that's what we have to do, but we can't give up. We have to keep doing that.
Exactly, thank you. Can you just talk to me about the results you've seen in some of your patients? And have those results sort of inspired you to continue? And secondly, on the back of that, have you ever had a point where you've just thought, because of pressure from colleagues, that you didn't want to carry on? Because of, talking about...
No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. What keeps me going are these reports from families. When you have a parent send you a video of their child saying mama for the first time at the age of 12, who was told the child will never talk, will never walk, will never do anything. This is so for this one little girl that I take care of. She has a genetic disorder. When they came to see me, she was 10 years old and she was having over 100 seizures an hour on her EEG. She laid in a stroller and did not do anything. No eye contact, no smiling. Her father's a firefighter. Her mother quit her job to stay home and take care of the child. I'll never forget the look on the father's face of utter desperation. Is this going to help my child? And she has responded so beautifully. She's the one who said mama for the first time when she was 12. She drinks from a sippy cup that she's able to pick up and drink. She's actually feeding herself. She plays on an iPad. Now, her genetic disorder has held her back developmentally, but look at what her potential has been on cannabis medicine. It's allowed her to reach her potential. I have hundreds of patients that have these results. There's a little boy that I wrote about in my book. So I had 2 books. My first book was purchased by the publishing company, so that's not available anymore. But the second book has the follow-up. This is a little boy that came in at the age of 4, not speaking. He was on a drug that's known to cause a side effect of rage. He had his entire family absolutely terrified. They all walked on eggshells around this little 4-year-old. And if you looked at him, you'd say, how can he be a terror? He was a terror. And the mother came with both grandmothers, and they were all in tears in my office. And I said, well, let's try. Now, fast forward, here we are about 8.5 years later. He wins awards at school for having good behavior. He is, and what the mom says, his name is Gavin. The mom says, everybody at school loves Gavin. The whole school loves Gavin. He learned to speak. He learned to write. He does math. Do not tell me that cannabis is bad for your brain. The seizures are reined in. The autism is reined in. He has some other conditions as well. And it's not been perfect, but my goodness, what a change in his quality of life. And he's on very high doses of both CBD, THC, additionally THCA, which is the raw form of THC. He also takes CBDA. It's a lot of oil. The family found a company that helps donate some of the oil. By the way, he has a sister with seizures and autism as well, so imagine that kind of difficulty and challenges. Both kids doing phenomenally well with cannabis, achieving in life. Learning to speak, learning to read and write. It's just, how do you deny the results?
In this country, we have a group of neurologists who, in their guidance, they talk about the damage to the growing brain with THC. And I wanted to ask you about that, but also, what do you see the best results? You know, what's the best results you see? Is it CBD, is it THC, or is it very mixed depending on what you're treating? But I think most importantly is, can we talk about the damage to the growing brain with THC? Is that a thing?
Okay, so let's talk about this. And I write about this in my book. If you are a teenager and you are doing, by the way, the 2 times that your brain is developing most is in utero, right before you're born, as a fetus to a baby. And then during the teenage years, your brain goes through a huge, like kind of laying down the train tracks of the neurons to develop executive function and so on. Now remember, we all have an endocannabinoid system, not for THC, but we have an endocannabinoid system because we make natural endocannabinoids that help balance and regulate, and the word homeostasis, help balance everything that's going on in terms of stressors, internal and external. If you are a teenager and you are overdoing THC, like meaning tremendous amounts of THC unopposed by CBD, that is those are what all the studies show. Well, you can have a lower IQ and you can have anxiety as when you move into adulthood. You can have poor executive function and more impulsivity. But remember, are these children with seizure disorders? Are these children with autism? How do you compare apples and oranges? It's like me saying, oh, you have lung cancer, let me give you the treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So we are not talking about overuse or abuse of THC by a teenager. And by the way, I just survived, my son's 21, so I just survived the teenage years. And let me tell you, more of everything when you're a teenager is better. More video games, more French fries, staying up all night, playing video, doing their thing. You would never leave a teenager to determine their, quote, medication. So overuse and use. Now, by the way, it's not nearly as bad as what the old data from the 1980s and 1990s, by the way, supported by the government to show the harm of cannabis, okay? However, there can be in certain groups, if you're genetically susceptible, to have problems with THC and potentially create problems for yourself as an adult. This is not the same as a medically supervised program for children on cannabinoid medicine for severe illnesses like intractable epilepsy and autism. So I do not worry about development. Why? Because I just told you, I see patients who are learning to talk, learning to read, learning to write. If it's damaging, show me the damage. Where is the damage? I don't see it in this population of taking medically supervised phytocannabinoid treatment. I use THC in my patients. In fact, 2 of the patients I just mentioned, the siblings that have both epilepsy and autism, they take huge doses of THC, doses that would put everybody here under the table. Why? Because they have an endocannabinoid system deficiency. They don't make enough endocannabinoids. So for instance, if you don't make enough insulin, what do we call you? A type 1 diabetic? And what do we give you? We give you insulin. We don't leave you deficient. Everybody's walking around taking vitamin D. Why? Because we're all vitamin D deficient, and we know that it's very important for our brain, our mood, our function. Why would we leave a child endocannabinoid deficient? Now, I don't have endocannabinoids to prescribe, but what do I have that mimics endocannabinoids? It's not CBD, it's THC. THC mimics anandamide very closely, and if you don't believe me, check out Dr. Meshulam's research. He's the one who taught me about this. We have to understand that some people have this imbalance in their endocannabinoid system, and we must replace it, because until you replace it, you are not going to see benefits. CBD, the way can I explain how CBD works real quick? So it doesn't work the same way at the cannabinoid receptors. THC binds to the cannabinoid receptor and causes a chemical reaction in the cell, basically telling the cell, balance out. It's the same as what an endocannabinoid does. CBD binds to like a side site of the receptor. I call it like a traffic regulator. It's like standing by the traffic light, kind of determining what's going to happen at that site. So CBD affects the receptor in a very different way, but most of CBD's action is actually outside the endocannabinoid system. Everybody check out my new YouTube channel. My first video I published is how does CBD work for epilepsy? So everybody can learn about that, and there is research to show how it works. We have 3 different areas that I explained that we know for sure, and then there's a couple of potential sites. But it's really important to understand that all of this research is now creating this body of knowledge, and I don't think physicians can ignore it anymore. I think now, you know, I'll share this with everybody. In my first book, I wrote about my mother, who had, shortly after I was born, I won't tell you what year, but back in the 60s, she started having seizures. And she had 3 seizures, and then they placed her, and back then they didn't even have CAT scan or anything. They just told my father, you know, she may die, we don't know, it might be a brain tumor, who knows what it is. And she took 2 drugs, phenobarbital and Dilantin. To this day, they don't know how Dilantin works. But yet they'll hold us back on cannabis. Oh, or CBD. We don't know how it works. Well, we've been using drugs since the 1960s, 50s even, and we still don't have a mechanism of action. So there's a lot of hypocrisy around this. It appears that we have to prove that cannabis is the be-all, end-all, with no side effects before people will accept it, and I just think that's pretty hypocritical.
You're absolutely right, and I've always said that we don't need to know exactly how cannabis works in my son. We just know that he doesn't have seizures anymore. That's what matters. And it's absolutely right. The anti-epileptics our children are given, they don't understand the method of action. They don't understand interaction. So there's an obsession with how does cannabis interact with pharmaceuticals. Well, how do 14 anti-epileptics interact with each other when you're trying to stop seizures? We don't know, but we still give them. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very, very interesting.
The latest data on drug interactions is that there really aren't very many. There's just really 1 or 2 drugs, Depakote or valproic acid and clobazam, that you just have to watch. It's not deadly, not dangerous. As long as there's a doctor on board and you're doing blood work, it's easy. It's easier than some of the stuff I saw in the emergency room.
Do you use wanted to talk to you about minor cannabinoids. So do you think they have a place as well in your practice? And are you using more of them and more understanding about how they work and interact with the CBD and THC?
Right, so we have now, I have patients taking CBD, THC, CBDA, THCA, CBG, CBDV, THCV, CBN, and I probably forgot a few. And I have found that actually combining them really works very well. Remember this idea of the entourage or synergistic effects? And many of the patients are able to take kind of enhance effects by combining them. CBG, for instance, when added in about a third of patients with autism who are nonverbal, they start speaking. In patients where CBD doesn't give you the full effect, adding THC or CBDA, or sometimes CBDV, which I just started working with. There's a study out of Australia and 5 little girls in clinical trial out of Australia. Who knew? Can't do it in the United States, but now Australia's leading the way. 5 little girls with a severe form of epilepsy and autism called Rett syndrome. Some of these kids were having over 300 seizures a month. They began using CBDV, and they saw a median effect of greater than 79% reduction of seizures. That's huge for a child who's having that many seizures with. And again, read the end of the abstract. Safe and well tolerated. And I challenge anybody to find me a study on medical cannabis that doesn't say somewhere in there, safe and well tolerated. It doesn't exist. I've read it all. All of these studies say safe and well tolerated. And that's the part of it that really frustrates me with other doctors is they're hanging on to that research from the 80s, 70s and 80s with that bias, and they're not keeping up with what's being published now. And now we have long-term data on CBD, and it's showing that improvement in cognition, improvement in the EEG, improvement in behavior. How can we ignore it?
Exactly. Can you talk to me, finally, because we are running out of time, but talk to me about the role of parents, because I think my personal experience, I'm now very lucky that my son's doctors are fabulous, but I have pushed really hard for them to work with me and help my son. But many times I've always felt like a bystander, like someone who shouldn't be involved in their child's care because I'm not a doctor. And I think, for me personally, that is what catapulted me into moving to Holland, because I thought, well, no one's listening to me. I'm going to try and do something to save my son, because if actually I wait to allow the doctors to help me, then I'm not going to have a son anymore. And I think that doctors see us sometimes as sort of, agitators in a way if we don't do as we're told. And I'm just interested on your take on that.
Well, my take is, how am I supposed to know how the child is if I don't listen to the parents? So when I trained as a pediatric ER doctor, when a 3-month-old baby comes in, they can't tell you how they feel, so you rely on the parents. And I think it's unfortunate that doctors don't want to listen to parents and hear what they have to say. I have to rely on your feedback in order for the treatment to work. So I try to collaborate, and I see it as a partnership. I think if you're challenged or, what's the word I'm looking for, Hannah? Intimidated by a parent who comes in who might know more than you about a particular thing, the ego, doctors in general, we've got big egos. So it's just something you kind of have to deal with. We've been told our whole lives, oh, you're smart, you can be a doctor. And it starts to get to you. But I see doctors in the audience shaking their heads. Yeah, there you go. They're pointing to each other. But you guys understand. I mean, it's one of those things where we're told, well, you're the elite and you know. But about this, unless you bother to learn about it, nobody's teaching it to you. You have to learn about it. And I only see a child in a little window, even if it's just 1 hour, but you're with your child 24/7. You know your child the best. If I don't work with you, I don't need to dictate to you. And it's very important that doctors start doing that, because these children are suffering. If we can't help the most vulnerable in our society, what is the point? And I don't understand, I may have become kind of more existential as I've gotten older. We're here for a very short time on earth. I see children who die. I lost 7 kids at the beginning of this year to stage 4 cancers who came to me too late. I don't know if I could have helped them, but it wasn't enough time to figure it out. What is the point of hanging on to these paradigms of pharmaceuticals when you might be able to change the quality of life and improve a child's existence with a plant? What is the big deal? You know, I just don't get it. We have to work with the parents.
We do, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it's about the ego. That's my experience, is the threat that you... I've had experience, I would say, with male doctors more, because I'm an outspoken mother. They don't like it. And it is about threatening them as a doctor, and they don't like it. I'm just so grateful for people like you who are happy to make that relationship, because that's how you get that child well, is work together.
And one of the things that, if there's parents here, you think, how do I broach this? You know, one of the best things to do is go on, you know, Google Scholar or PubMed, print out some articles, and bring it with you, and just say, here, and just leave it, and just say, here, this would really be meaningful if you could read this and let me know what you think. And that's not a challenging way. And then I also have patients that will buy the various books that are out there on cannabis, my book, but also there's a wonderful book on, is the slide up? We'll put the slide up. Oh, there it is. There's this wonderful book by Dustin Sulak that's actually written for clinicians, for doctors. It's a little more sciencey. Mine's a little more balanced between patient and science. Hopefully I walk that line. But that's the way you do it. So for all of $40 for Dr. Sulak's book, or $20 on Amazon, you can hand it to your doctor and just say, you know, maybe it would really help us if you could learn about this. And then leave it. Don't be challenging, because again, if you bruise that ego, you've kind of, they're going to be like, oh, it's that mother again, and roll their eyes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it is about not being aggressive. If your doctor doesn't want to work with you, it is about trying to educate them, trying to work with them, but be you know, forthright. You've got to be forthright. This is about your child's life, but it's also about being polite, because actually you never get anywhere with being rude to anyone, even if they're not working with you. So absolutely agree with you. So did you want to talk through your resources further before
Sure.
we finish?
So I made a slide for resources for those people who are interested. So projectcbd.org is a great website to be able to read about CBD. It's been in existence. In fact, they were the group that helped make CBD prominent they formed in 2011, 2012. They went all around California, started testing cannabis to see if they could find CBD dominant cannabis. So they've been a leader. The Society of Cannabis Clinicians is all around the world. It's a group I belong to. We do quarterly meetings, and it's all about sharing information. The Medical Cannabis Institute offers credits to physicians and other healthcare professionals. They have a wonderful course. I did the epilepsy module, but you can do the modules at your own pace. And then the Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society is here in the UK. And then, of course, MedCan, your group. And then one other thing I wanted to say, I think we're winding up, and this is kind of brutal to say, but I'm going to say it. A dead child is not better than a child on cannabis. Okay, this is not acceptable. Sorry about that.
I just want to say thank you to you, because I have been at that place where, that's why I moved to Holland, because I didn't want to bury my son, and he's now just over 2 years seizure free. And that's because of people like you and Professor Mike Barnes, who's helped me, taught me, backed me, and got my son well. And I just want to say thank you to you, because without you, we wouldn't be where we are. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. You're absolutely amazing.